He's the United States' top diplomat, and as the US Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson has the unenviable job of mending ties between his country and Russia.
The current state of US-Russia relations is at a low point. There is a low level of trust between our two countries. The world's two foremost nuclear powers cannot have this kind of relationship.
President Trump picked him for the role because Tillerson spent a decade leading the oil and gas giant Exxon Mobil. His professional expertise and contacts were expected to help improve relations with Russia and other countries. Instead, Tillerson's past may be coming back to haunt him. The US Treasury Department has accused Exxon Mobil of blatant disregard of US sanctions on Russia and has fined the company $2 million. The charges stem from 8 deals the company signed with Russian energy giant Rosneft back in 2014. The accusations couldn't have come at a worse time for the Trump administration. The US president is already facing criticism over his family's alleged links to Russia. So far, the government is keeping the case at arm's length.
The secretary recused himself from his dealings with Exxon Mobil at the time that he became Secretary of State. This all predates his time here at the Department of State, and so I'm going to refrain from giving any comment on that at this time.
I understand.
But Exxon Mobil is fighting back. It's filed a complaint against US Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin.
At the time those documents were executed in 2014, Rosneft was not subject to any sanction, and no sanctions prohibited the activities called for or reflected in those documents. Instead, the sole basis of the OFAC's July 20, 2017 notice is that the documents were signed on behalf of Rosneft by its president and chairman Igor Sechin, who at the time was subject to sanctions only in his individual capacity.
Legal experts believe the oil major has a strong case, and even with the worst outcome, a $2 million fine would be chump change for Exxon Mobil. But the reputational damage for the Secretary of State could prove a lot more costly. Denee Savoia, TRT World.
And international sanctions against Russia are also causing troubles for German engineering conglomerate Siemens. It has stopped deliveries of power equipment to Russia after some of those supplies ended up in Crimea. That is despite EU sanctions. Siemens is selling its stake in a Russian joint venture and says it will take further steps if there are other breaches of the restrictions. Now, TRT World's editor-at-large, Craig Peters, is in Paris. Craig, great to have you with us. Tell us, we'll come back to Siemens in a minute, but let's start with Exxon Mobil. What is the legal basis of this case?
Well, let's start with sanctions. The sanctions the Obama administration slapped on Russia were not sanctions. It was essentially a scarlet letter that the administration decided to brand into a number of individuals to block their bank accounts and ability to do personal business or travel in the West. The so-called sanctions never identified any never identified any corporations. America was still allowed, and Americans were still allowed to deal with Russian corporations. What happens here is the CEO, Sechin, of Rosneft signed a deal with Exxon in his capacity as CEO of the company, a very normal thing in business. And this is why the Treasury Department decided to sue Exxon Mobil and fine them $2 million, and why Exxon is spending more than a $2 million fine to get this thrown out of court.
Amazing state of affairs. So, crucial difference there between measures against individual people versus measures against companies. Are there possible...
It's absolutely essential.
Yep, absolutely. Are there any possible implications against Rex Tillerson in all of this?
Well, this is clearly being done to embarrass Rex Tillerson and the Trump administration. And regardless anyone's feelings towards the Trump administration, as Exxon points out here, this fine is unlawful and capricious. And I spent the day talking with lawyers and reading the legal papers filed with the court to get this fine dropped. And it is a devastating indictment of what Exxon calls capriciousness.
Okay.
They're just doing this to make people look bad.
Okay, let's go to the Siemens case now. Is Siemens simply being naive, disingenuous, or could any company make such a mistake in their position, do you think?
Look it. The conventional wisdom in the West is that Russia is the devil. And if you're going to sell items to the devil, you can be damn sure that those products are going to go to hell. And that is just what happened here. I have not had an opportunity to fully study the legal papers in the Siemens case, but it seems to be a mirror image of what happened to Exxon Mobil here. They sold a product to the Russians, apparently legitimately, and the Russians took the product to Crimea. Now, is that the fault of Siemens? We'll probably hear that in court.
I'm sure we're going to be seeing a lot more of that case as well. Craig Capitas in Paris, thank you so much.